Welcome everyone to the second series of webinars about engaging people, mainly around food, but also includes health and the environment. This webinar is being run in conjunction with the Sustainable Food Cities and also the Crunch, and there's going to be an intro to both of those in a minute. I'm Maria from Sustain, which is the Alliance for Better Food and Farming, and we've been working with the Eden Project on the Crunch Ambassadors Programme, which you'll hear a little bit about from Nora from the Wellcome Trust in a minute. We've got some great speakers lined up for you. Hopefully you'll be able to see the slides by now. In terms of general housekeeping, all the participants are muted. If you're listening to this and if you've got any technical problems, then please do message us. In the left-hand side of your screen, you'll see a little screen down there, and you can actually type a message in there. I understand some people are having some issues in terms of me breaking up. If that is consistent, please let me know. And if you have an issue with it, what I suggest you do is message us in advance, but also there is some facilities at the top of the screen for you to improve your audio quality. So just check that, and it might also be your speakers. So if you have any housekeeping issues, please message Elise, which is actually Ben today, who's coordinating this for us. At the end of this, you will have time to ask the speakers questions. To ask a question, please again type that in the bottom left-hand corner where it says chat. The good news is that this webinar is being recorded, and there are the slides and the recording will be available afterwards so that you can pass this on to others as well. If you do send us a message, please just, obviously we'll have your name, but just tell us which organisation that you're calling from. The third in this series of webinars, which will be about engaging families, will be on November the 22nd, similar time, 2 to 3:30. We're just finalising the programme for that at the moment, and so we will be publicising that, so look out for that if you want to join us. I'm now going to hand over to Ben from Sustain, who's going to give us an introduction to Sustainable Food Cities. Thanks, Ben.
Thanks, Maria. Yes, so I know it says Maria on here, but it is actually Ben from Sustain. I'm just going to say a few words about Sustainable Food Cities. Apologies to those of you who've joined us on the webinar before. You will have heard this a few times, so I'll keep it brief. So for those of you who are new to this, Sustainable Food Cities is a network that was set up 3 years ago by the Sword Association Sustain Food Matters, to reflect the fact that there are more and more people taking a place-based approach towards their food, and not just individual food projects, but a joined-up approach, bringing together a whole range of different people, organisations locally. And what we've seen over the last 3 years is a huge groundswell of locations taking this joined-up approach across the country. So we now have 46 different network members, and you'll see from the slide there's a good spread across the country, and we've even expanded out into Ireland as well. We've got good relationships with similar approaches across the world, from Milan to Rome, Vancouver, etc. So what do we mean by a food partnership? Oops, I've jumped over a slide. The main tenet of these groups that are joining us is that they are cross-sector, that they've got a whole range of people involved in the food, with interest in the food sector locally, whether that's in the public sector, maybe public health, whether that's community groups, so those groups who may be working with surplus food or food growing projects, and also local enterprises, so those who are sort of spearheading great work with using local suppliers and sustainably produced food. So the partnerships bring together these groups. A lot of them are led by maybe the local government, local public health often, or they're led by community groups. We are completely flexible about who takes the lead, as long as there is a good representation of all those groups around the table. We want them to have a joint vision. All of those 46 have that joint vision, and they have that action plan which says, what are they going to do to try and make a difference locally. Now, as I said, yes, we want to get a good range of people around the table. We also want to make sure they're covering a good range of issues, because that for us has been at the heart of some of those most successful examples out there. Those people who are not only working on promoting healthier food or tackling food poverty, but also looking at some of the issues around food waste or improving public sector procurement, supporting food enterprises, these sorts of things. And where every area will have its own local focus, its own priorities, we're keen to sort of reflect that, embrace that sort of flexibility, but we're also keen to make sure that there are that we're not missing people from around the table, that you haven't got maybe just public health, but they're not including food waste, so they're not including the local community groups. And that's what we're seeing comes through in the most successful models out there. So apart from all these wonderful local groups within the network, what is it we actually do? So we do webinars like this. We do a regular newsletter that comes out every month. Check out the website, sustainablefoodcities.org, as you'll see at the bottom there, which has a lot of information, a lot of resources, a lot of case studies. If you're particularly interested in work around food poverty, then check out the website. There's a big page with lots of links to great local projects and local initiatives on there. One of the other things we do is events. We have an annual conference, and we're keen to try and support more localized networks and localized events as well. And we also do this award. So this is really to recognize those pioneering places. Yes, we call it Sustainable Food Cities. It's not just cities. We've got counties. We've even been talking to some islands as well as boroughs as well, that you'll see a few of there. And as I said, these recognise some of those, some of the most pioneering places around the country. There's more information on the website about how you apply for one of those awards. You need to be part of the network. You need to have that alliance already set up, that local partnership set up, and then you can have a look at what it takes to kind of get a bronze, silver, and hopefully in the next few years we'll have our first gold cities as well. One last thing before I hand over. We also run a focus of campaign every year. This is really to, beyond the kind of the general support and communications and dare I say some noise about a whole breadth of different stuff around sustainable food. We also have a bit of a focus to really help handhold cities and work with those places that have got who are doing sort of great stuff to sort of share that good practice. The first year of the project, we focused on sustainable fish. That's still running, but it's sort of spun off, and many of you, some of you on the line, will be involved in promoting that and working on that campaign. Next year, we're looking to do something around Sugar Smart and promoting around healthy food. Keep an eye on the website, sign up to the newsletter for more information on that. But over the last year and a half, we've been doing stuff around food poverty. And I just wanted to flag up a couple of things that are coming up or on the website that are perhaps relevant to today's webinar. Firstly, there is a funding opportunity on the Sustainable Food Cities website. I will post a link in the chat box shortly. A new £4 million grant to boost volunteering among the over 50s. This is run by Nesta and the Office for Civil Society. There's a deadline at the end, it's the last week of October, for groups to apply for grants for that, and that's all about better engaging with older people. It looks as if you could be applying for that. I haven't read it in detail, but you could be applying for work around food projects that engage with older people. So check that out. I'll forward that link in a second. In terms of other sustainable food cities work on food poverty, there is we've got Meals on Wheels week coming up on the week commencing the 7th of November. I will forward a link through to that shortly. And Sustain is going to be launching a joint paper with the NACC, this is the National Association of Care Caterers, on good practice models for Meals on Wheels from around the UK. So that is looking at some of the examples of Meals on Wheels that are running both within the Food Cities network and also some other great examples outside of that. Again, I'll forward a link to where that is going to be launched. It'll be on the Sustain website, but there'll also be a link from the Sustainable Food Cities website when that paper is launched in November. And watch this space for more work around, particularly around Meals on Wheels, but more generally around food for older people as well in 2017. With that, I'd like to hand back over to Maria. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Ben. We're now going to hear from Nora Maddock from the Wellcome Trust, who's going to give us an introduction to the Crunch, which is a programme of activity that they've helped pull together. And just uploading the presentation for you now, Nora. Please bear with us.
Thank you,
Nora.
Maria.
That's great. Thank you.
Thanks, Maria, and thank you, Ben. My name is Nora, and I work for the Wellcome Trust. And the Wellcome Trust is a global independent charitable foundation, and we exist to improve health for everyone. And we achieve this by supporting thousands of people as researchers and scientists around the world to take on some of the big health issues that we face and to collaborate. And one of the priority areas I'm going to focus on today is called Our Planet, Our Health. And that global programme explores food systems and growing urbanisation and how our health and our changing environment are closely linked. And out of this major priority area, we've decided to do a national engagement programme called the Crunch. And if you'd like to find out more about Our Planet, Our Health, you can have a look on the Wellcome Trust website, and we've got some exciting announcements coming up about a new major research programme. And through the Crunch, we've worked in partnership with a number of organisations, like the Eden Project and Sustain. And the aim of the Crunch is to enable people of all. Hello, can you still hear me? Hello?
Yes, we lost you for a minute, but you're now back on.
Did you hear the bit about the Wellcome Trust?
Yes, we did. You've only just lost you.
Okay, great. I'll move on to just sharing some details with you about the Crunch itself. So it's a programme for people of all ages. We've got 4 different strands to it. One was particularly for schools and further education colleges. So we sent free science equipment, you can see pictures of the boxes there, to primary and secondary schools across the UK. So we produced almost over 30,000 of these kits, and they were sent to their science coordinators and heads of biology in schools, and they were sent to state schools and independent schools and also special schools and pupil referral units as well. And these kits included lots of science equipment and also activities that are linked to curricula across the UK. And there are a number of online materials as well, including videos to support the scientific experiments themselves. And these are all free for anyone to use. You don't have to be a school. You can go on our website, the Crunch website, and download any of the activities and lesson plans without registering as a school. And we've also got a drama programme that is linked to the science activities, and we've got 5 plays that were specially commissioned for young people, for children, and we've got 5 more that were commissioned for teenagers, and they're all on our website as well that you can download, along with sound effects and videos about kind of movement that you might want to do as well that link to those plays. And all of the activities explore, for example, where our food comes from, the nutrients that are in food, how this is linked to our health, how food is produced, and also some of the issues around that. For example, in the primary school programme, we look at palm oil, how that's produced and how the production of the palm oil can affect the environment, and looking at how that links to other living. Hello, can you still hear me?
Yes, sorry, Nora, we lost you.
Did you hear the bit about palm oil?
Yes. Yes,
Okay.
we heard all of that. That's fine.
Okay, that was just one example of one of the issues. And then in secondary school kits, there are some more in-depth investigations looking at, for example, microbes in food, and also looking at some of the issues around feeding a growing population, and exploring hydroponics and some other activities. So they're all very much practical activities that young people can do, and focusing on the creative aspect of science, that science is about asking questions. It's not about facts, it's about exploring questions and building our understanding of these areas. So that's just a quick overview of the schools programme, but I'd advise you to have a look on our website to find out more. We've also got a programme for families. So we've worked in partnership with the Association for Science and Discovery Centres. 9 different science centres across the UK have been delivering amazing community events during the summer. There are still events taking place. If you have a look on our website, you can find out more. And the activities, you can see some of the pictures there. For example, families can get on a bike, and the story there is that it looks like a normal smoothie bike, but actually the food that's been used to create the drinks is surplus fruit and veg that would normally be thrown away. So it's a way of an interactive way of exploring some of the issues around food waste. And the little boy in the middle is holding something that he's actually made, a tortilla. So one of the key things is about, for young people to actually go on a journey from, they can grind up the corn or roll oats and then make that into something that they can actually eat. So we've got a number of different activities that have been taking place, and again on our website you can find out a bit more about that programme. There's also a game called Hungry City, which you can play on our website, which is linked to the live events. And that's something that people of all ages can play as well. And it's free to do that. Okay, so moving on to the next programme. So we've been working really closely with the Eden Project and Sustain to develop a network of people from lots of different backgrounds and ages across the UK who are really passionate about doing things in their local community, doing lots of different things in their local communities. We've got over 800 people have signed up, and you can have a look at their profiles on the Crunch website. 15 network events have already taken place, and that's linked in. Hi, did you hear that? Hello? Hello?
Hi, Nora. You only dropped out very briefly.
Okay, so I was just saying that we've had 15 network events across the UK, and that's linked into the Sustainable Food Cities network. So people have come along and have, the aim there is to support individuals to have conversations, whether that's with family, friends, colleagues, and if they'd like to, it's providing them with resources that they can use to run their own events. So one resource has been particularly popular is a food timeline activity where you can explore change through the past, to kind of, so it's developing that understanding of, change is not something to be feared. Things have happened before, things will happen again. And it also is an activity that works very well with older people as well, in terms of sharing food memories and looking at key moments, and then how that has linked to our health and to our environment. So that's one of the resources you can get if you sign up to be an ambassador, and it's still, you can still do that through our website, and there's a short application form to fill in there. And we also provide monthly newsletters that the Eden Project and Sustain put together, and in those newsletters we have opportunities for people to do stuff in their local communities as well, and to find out what they're up to. And as if more resources are developed, we will also share them with ambassadors through our website. Okay. And the final programme is for adults, and a number of events have taken place across the UK. And this programme is called Chew It Over. And the aim of this was to engage adults in kind of more in-depth dialogue about, their thoughts on food systems and the past, the present, and also looking towards the future, and encouraging discussion about that and how our environment and health are linked. So the events programme has now ended, but we're going to be sharing kind of insights and sound bites and film footage from that programme in January 2017. And what was interesting about it was it combined dialogue with theatre. So a dialogue organisation, Hopkins Van Mill, worked with a theatre organisation called Look Left, Look Right, to produce some really interesting theatrical performance pieces to kind of stimulate the discussion during the events. And we look forward to kind of sharing that with you all in January. And we'll also include within that report
Hi Nora, we've just lost you briefly again.
Okay, it's just to say we're looking forward to kind of sharing that with you all in January. And one of the last event of Cheer It Over brought together participants with, individuals who work in food policy and also strategy at the Wellcome Trust and consumer organisations such as Which, to kind of provide an opportunity for these key influencers to listen to what participants were sharing in their views. So we'll be pulling that all together into the report that we share in January. And just to finish off, really, we've got a lot of resources on our website, so I'd recommend having a look there. For example, we've got some infographics about the true cost of your breakfast, so exploring all of the different resources that are required to produce our tasty breakfast in the morning. For example, one of the big surprises for me when I started working on the Crunch was the amount of water that is actually used in the production of our food globally. So that's one of the resources there that's explored in terms of different food items that we eat. And we've also got some sound bites relating to the Cheer It Over programme. But more will be coming in that section of our website during the coming months. And there are lots of activities as well that families can do at home. For example, you can make your own delicious breakfast muffin recipe from Homsina Mayers, who's from Oaxaca. So there's a range of stuff that will be going up on our website during the coming months. And just to finish by a big thank you to all of our project partners who've worked on this. And also thank you all for listening. I've got some details there, the Crunch website URL, and also our different social media channels. We've got a Facebook group, and we've also got a hashtag that we use on Instagram and on Twitter. So please join the conversation online and do let us know if you have any questions about any of the programmes I've just mentioned.
That's great. Thanks ever so much, Nora. And as here at Sustain and Eden have been working on the Ambassadors Programme, just to say, although we've had the networking events, it's not too late to sign up as an ambassador. And there's also a range of engagement resources available via the Crunch website. I'm now going to introduce you to Wendy Buin from the Sensory Trust. She's logged in with Juliet from the Eden Project. Engaging older people is one of those areas where the Sensory Trust have done a lot of work. And in fact, Wendy published with Eden a field guide to engaging older people, which I believe is available through SlideShare for free, which you can download. I know the Sensory Trust have produced some great resources in the past in terms of engaging older people, and some of which I've used with groups with dementia, for instance, in my work as a horticultural therapist. So thank you, Wendy, and I'll hand over to you now. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. You can't see it, but I'm blushing slightly from that introduction. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. I hope you can hear me okay. My name is Wendy from the Sensory Trust. Lovely introduction there from Maria. I am a project manager for Creative Spaces, and that's a project we've been running since 2009, which is supporting older people with dementia to lead more physically, socially and mentally active lives within their communities. And recently, since 2014, we've actually been working with people out in the communities. So I hope to be able to bring some of that experience to today's presentation. A little bit maybe about the background of the Sensory Trust. We're a small but perfectly formed charity based down in Cornwall, the Eden Project. And it's quite difficult to describe what we do in a nutshell, but I'll try. We work with people who manage or own public green spaces. That could be anything from an organisation, large charity such as the National Trust, down to local authorities. And we try and engage people in looking at ways in which these spaces can be as accessible as possible to as many people as possible. And that's usually engaging people from the communities, people of all ages, all levels of ability, should have the opportunity to go outside and experience outside environments and the benefits that we get from our connection with nature. And it's what we do is we work with people through consultation, advisory work. We've done publications and community consultations, and specifically on my occasion, it's about project work. So I will move on now to. Oh, I can't move my slide forward. Hang on, what's going on? Oh, there it is. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so today's talk is actually based on the book that we worked on for and with the Eden Project, which is about working with older people. And I've kind of broken it down into different sort of themes, if you like, looking at where to start. I know that sounds a bit of a daft question for some people, but you know, it is sometimes quite hard to locate groups within our society. So I kind of want to take you back to the beginning with that and looking at the benefits of working with older people for them and for you, looking at the different levels in which you can involve people in your whether it's an event or a workshop or an activity or a project, looking at possibly some of the questions around accessibility and not just in a physical sense. And then I want to kind of finish off with a little bit about working with people with dementia, because as we know, it is a huge concern in today's society, and they are a group within our society that people tend not to see as having any value to add to the community. And hopefully today I can dispel some of those myths. Okay, so right. Okay, so where do we actually start? I guess most people would be thinking already of some of the larger sort of age-related organisations such as Age UK, the University of the Third Age, or U3A. You may be thinking of local carers groups, local interest groups such as historical societies, craft and hobby groups, reading groups, anything like that that you have in your area is a good place to start to engage older people. Putting up posters is quite a basic thing for people to do. Libraries, shops, community centres, leisure centres. Leisure centres people tend not to think about, but in our growing ageing society, there are a lot more older people who are physically fit. I can say that from knowledge. My parents are in their 80s and they both go to the gym once a week. So don't dispel things like leisure centres. Hairdressers, great place to put posters up. Even your local butchers, anywhere where you think older people might go and might use services, shops, businesses, then it's worth targeting them and using something quite simple as a poster to begin with. If we move on from that, sorry about this, I think my poster's a bit slow. There we go. Some of the things you may not think about: local disability organisations and groups. RNIB, or the Royal National Institute for the Blind, will have local groups. Down in Cornwall, we have an organisation called Disability Cornwall, and I suspect there's similar sort of groups in other counties around the country. And looking at things like mobility, sensory impairments, learning disability groups, mental health groups, and obviously dementia groups. And in that, I would include things such as memory cafes, we call them in Cornwall. I think they can be called dementia cafes in other areas. But don't be afraid to use the local media. One of the things I was looking at while I was putting this presentation together was some statistics around local radio stations. And that's including local BBC radio stations as well as commercial stations. And I was quite surprised actually that 59% of our adult population do listen to local radio. So although you might be a bit wary about going on your local radio, don't be, because it's a really good way of catching people who are at home during the daytime, which for a lot of retired and older people is exactly where they are. Apparently 51% of those people listen only to local commercial stations. So if you have a station like we do here, which is St Austell Bay Radio, then definitely contact them. They're always looking for local news, and they are more than happy to invite you on for 5-10 minutes, and they may even play some of your local favourite tunes if you ask them nicely. So it's definitely worth contacting them. Social media, Facebook is not something we tend to think about when we think about older people. But again, it's the same principle as the leisure centres. A lot of older people now are getting onto things like Facebook and joining online clubs because of this sort of growing fear of people feeling isolated and lonely. And a lot more older people now are au fait with computers and smartphones and things like that. So don't discount social media. Also, organisations like Age UK, Alzheimer's Society, U3A all have Facebook pages where you yourself can actually provide information. So you could send it to them and ask them to put it out through their own social media. And it might be that an older person's family members will be on Facebook and they might be looking for something for their mum or their dad or their auntie or their uncle to get involved with. So if they pick it up and they go, oh, Mum, I've seen this event or this workshop, it'd be great for you, let's go along, then that's brilliant for your work. I know that sort of a lot of what we call early footwork when you're doing an event or an activity or a project is time consuming, but you will reap the benefits later, I promise you. Okay, so moving on to the levels of involvement. There are different levels that you can get older people interested in whatever it is you're doing. And I've broken the 4 down here. There's an initial kind of just informing people of what's going on. There's then the level of consulting, so bringing older people into whatever it is your idea that you're developing at a really early stage. And then obviously there's things like, full participation. And then I want to sort of talk about volunteering as a slightly separate subject than participation. Move on to talking about informing in a bit more detail. Face-to-face, it's like going on the local radio and things like that. You cannot beat your own passion for whatever it is that you're doing. So if you contact a group and you send them a flyer and say, we're putting on an event in our local area, we'd like to invite your group members to come along and join us, just think about saying to them, in fact, I can probably pop in at your next meeting and just spend 5 or 10 minutes just telling people about it, because your passion, your enthusiasm for what you're doing is going to sell your event or your project or your activity far better than any flyer or poster in a newspaper can. They're great, they have their place, they're great for raising awareness, but if you can stand in front of people and put your passion forward, that's more likely to grab them. If you tell them about what you want to achieve by what you're doing and why you believe they are vital to that success, or their members are vital to the success of that, then that's going to get them on your side. Telling people why they are important to you makes people feel valued. if you can provide people with a taster session, so if you can go with something practical, let people just have a little trial at something, that then engages them. They're more engaged with the idea of what you're going to do. So never underestimate word of mouth, because if you've done that face-to-face thing, if you've dragged people with your passion, if they'd had a go at what you're trying to get them involved in, they will go home, or they will go to their next club, or they will visit their friends, and they will remember you. And they're going to remember your attitude, they're going to remember your humour, and they're going to remember your passion. So, okay, so you've been out, you've done all that, you've got them engaged, they're all willing and keen to come along and join in. So at what point do you then get people involved in your project? And there's only one answer to that, really, in my book, and that's as soon as possible, at all stages. But if you can bring people at the beginning, then they're going to have a sense of ownership. They're going to feel part of whatever it is you're trying to build. So from initial ideas to developing the project, right through to doing something, to getting their feedback on its success afterwards, and possibly even from then looking to what to do in the future. Use creative engagements to bring people in. Creative activities promote a sense of equality within people. If you get people around a table and it's a conversation, you tend to find there will be some types of people who are more likely to give their input than others who may be a little bit shyer, less confident, sit back. If you use an activity that engages everybody on the same level, then people who are a little bit shy are more likely to get involved because they feel they're on the same level as everybody else. And once they feel that, they're more likely to get involved in the conversation. And an activity actually builds confidence in people as well. And people are more likely to communicate if they feel relaxed and they feel if they're having fun. If they feel it's like a meeting, then they're not so comfortable. So think of the venue that you're going to do the consultation in. Think about what you're going to provide. Not usually, a tea urn and a plate of rich tea biscuits doesn't usually do it. If you can think cake, if you can think tea party, the more you can do, the more people are going to get involved with what you're doing. But obviously think about accessibility, and that's something I'm going to come on to in a short while. Refreshments, cake, need I say more? Cake, you cannot go wrong with cake and a good cup of tea, and get people involved in that. So, so they feel that they're part of the whole consultation period. They're not just being there waited on hands and foot, but they're actively involved. Arranged consultations versus drop-ins. Okay, drop-ins is something that I've done myself in the past. People, if you do something like a drop-in, people don't feel that they have to commit to being in a certain place at a certain time. That amount of flexibility quite often suits older people, and particularly if it's a family with an older person who's got dementia, then if they can drop in on their way to the shops and things like that, it's less of an anxiety for mum or their dad or whoever. And it allows the opportunity for people to talk on a one-to-one basis as well. I've done situations where I've literally sat in the foyer of the library and just spoken with people as they've passed, but it gives them the opportunity to talk more if they feel that they're not having to battle against a stronger-willed person in the conversation, shall we say. And for some older people, you might be, and this is quite a sad thing to say, but you may be the only person they've spoken to that day or even that week. So you could probably make their day by providing a drop-in. So it's worth thinking about that. Arranged consultations do assist people who need consistency to plan their days. So there's option to do both there, and I would suggest that you do try both and try different ways of actually engaging people and finding them in your community. Okay, so participation. Great ways of involving older people in your project is intergenerational. There is something really magical that happens between older people and young people that those of us in the world of mortgages and time schedules and work don't tend to miss out on. The most meaningful things happen when you bring in young people. I think there's something about they understand each other's kind of social stigma. So don't discount having younger people in. If you're focusing on older people, think about bringing younger people in and working together with both of those generations. Matching people's skills and then their enthusiasm and their knowledge with the right participatory activity. So it's about talking to people, not just about what their knowledge is, but what their passion is as well. So, for example, you might come across somebody who can help out who's actually a master plumber or something like that, but has the passion for baking cakes. Or growing food. So it's worth thinking about whether he's actually going to be more useful through his passion than his actual sort of skill. And he may be more willing maybe to fix that leaky tap in the village hall if he's engaged in something he's passionate about, first of all. And make activities age friendly so that anybody of any age can join in the same activity, rather than saying, right, there's an activity over here that's for older people, or there's an activity over here that's going to suit young people. Try and find an activity that is flexible enough to engage everybody together at the same time and create that sense of equality within your activity or your event, whatever it is that you're doing. And consider people's comfort levels. When you're putting something on, is there plenty of seating? It might even be seating off to the side so that somebody can just go and sit down for 5 minutes and then come back. Is the seating comfortable? I don't know about you, but I've spent many hours sat on some really awful office chairs and feel the need to stand up every 5 minutes because they're killing my back. And it's no different probably in a lot of our community halls and village halls with seating. So look at the seating, maybe even getting some people to bring some nice colourful cushions and things like that for people's back. Just a little touch can actually mean a lot to an older person. Is the lighting good? Can people actually see? Whoop, I didn't do that. Is the lighting good? Can people clearly see their way through into the entrance? If you're doing something indoors, is your signage and waymarking clear enough for people to see? Can they see where the toilets are? Can they see where the activities are going on? So there's quite a lot to think about, I know, but I'm more than happy for people to email me afterwards. My email will come up and we can talk some more about that. So just very quickly then on to volunteering. I'm sorry if I'm going over. It's Juliet's shaking her head at me, that's fine. Okay, so places where you might want to get older people who can volunteer for you. Some of the obviously well-known ones, Age UK, but there's also places like the Centre for Ageing Better, which has a website. Volunteering Matters, also a website. The doit.org one, which is the one that all the local community volunteer services will put information onto. So it's a nationwide one, but it's fed in through all the local community volunteer services. So it's worth getting in touch with your local volunteer office and telling them what you're after, the skills, and also the personalities as well. The kind of people that you're looking for is really important for older people, not just about their skill and knowledge, but their personality and what they can bring to it. And I say that because 4.9 million people, 4.9 million people over 65 take part in volunteering or some form of civic engagement in the UK. That's a lot of older people that you could be tapping into. So get out there and get in touch with your volunteering office. Sorry about that. It seems to be sticking. Oh, there we go. All right. Accessibility. When we think about accessibility in older people, we tend to think wheelchair users, possibly walking sticks, and physical access, obviously, to a site or to a building, wherever you're doing an event, is really important. And you might need to think about using things like temporary ramps. Additional volunteers are useful to support an individual who has an impairment or a disability, to offer support. You don't necessarily want every volunteer running up and dragging an older person through your front door. They might not want the support, but to offer it. Sensory access is something else you need to consider. As I mentioned earlier, is the lighting too bright? Can people clearly see your signage and your waymarking? Intellectual access is about how you are getting your information out to older people in the first place. Is it in a format that is easy enough for them to read? Are you using large text? Nice, simple, dark text on light background? And you may want to consider using some pictorial images as well as text, particularly for older people with dementia who've lost the ability to read text. Then you may want to think about using some really nice, clear visual aids so people understand what you're trying to convey. Cultural access. For people with, for older people from different cultures, it's important to use an informal social event to discover what's going to make them feel comfortable and included. So you might want to do some pre-events before your main one, just to ascertain how you can make sure that everybody, regardless of their social or cultural background, is going to feel included in your event. And then the one we tend to less think about is economic. The economic sort of barriers, if you like. Is there local public transport to your event? If not, is there a community bus that could get people there? What's going to be the cost? Is there any cost to your event, or is it going to be free? Is there any cost for their participation, or is that going to be free? So all these things older people are going to be looking at, because particularly older people who are who live with a disability or impairment, who may be on a low income anyway. So don't discount things like how much your event is actually going to cost them. And finally, I just want to talk a bit about, back again, there you go, involving people living with dementia. For those of you, I'm sorry if I'm sort of telling you to, if you know this already, but I just wanted to make it clear that when we talk about dementia, we do include things like Alzheimer's. Alzheimer's is a form of dementia. Dementia is the umbrella word that covers diseases like Alzheimer's and vascular dementia and frontotemporal. There are hundreds, and I'm not going to name them all today. But some do's and don'ts for engaging people with dementia in your project. One is, do ensure that if you've got people with dementia coming to your event or your activity, that they come with the support required, okay? If you're not a carer, you cannot provide that care provision. That has to come with the individual. Talk to them, not the carer, okay? These are people living in our community, the same as the rest of us. And you're probably more likely working with people with mild to moderate dementia. So don't be frightened to talk to them, okay? And if you can provide them with social interaction, if you can get them working alongside somebody else, that gives the carer a break. It also allows the individual to actually interact with somebody else, somebody that they're not with 24/7. And that actually has a really good impact on that person's health and well-being, because you're doing that. And people with dementia have a lifetime of skills and knowledge which they can remember. So talk to them again about what they can offer, what skills do they have, what are they passionate about, and how they want to get involved, and to what level, and then how they can be supported to do that. Some of the don'ts now, okay? Don't discard people from dementia from your event because they have dementia. A lot of people live with mild to moderate dementia for years, okay? So don't assume that because they have dementia that they can't contribute to your event. Don't play the role of the carer. It's easy to slip into a caring role and try and support somebody, enable them to do something, but what you want to do is enable somebody to use their skills. And if you're not careful, if you support somebody too much, you take away a little bit of their independence. It can also lead to some difficult and uncomfortable situations. So I would say don't try and be the carer as such, just enable people. Don't correct people if they're confused or if they repeat anything. Makes them very anxious. And can lead to agitation, and it devalues a person as an individual within your community. If somebody repeats something, treat it like it's the first time you've heard it. And if they repeat it, that's fine. Okay, so just to sum up really, there we have it. Older people have the experience, they have the knowledge, they have the experience to deal with problems maybe that younger people don't. They have a lot of time on their hands to offer you. And whatever you do, don't discount older people because they have a disability or an impairment or an illness. I do apologise if I've gone on a bit too long now. I just want as well. And thank you very much for listening.
That's great. Thanks ever so much, Wendy. That was a really great whirlwind overview of working with older people, and you brought out some really excellent points. And I know we've had some really good feedback already in relation to that, and obviously an interest in some of your slides, etc. And we'll come on to the questions a bit later. A lot of the things that you've touched upon, I know the presentation I'm doing a bit later for the Hove Luncheon Club addresses some of those things. So that's be interesting from the point of view of having an actual project where that's actually some of those aspects are actually demonstrated. I'm going to take this opportunity to introduce Juliet from the Eden Project, who's going to cover off a project called My Tree, My Community. So I'll now hand over to Juliet. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Great. So I'm going to talk about, I'm Juliet Rose. I'm a community programme developer here at the Eden Project, and I'm going to talk about a project that we run every year on site that engages older people through schools, through our local schools. It happens at Christmas time every year. Just going to click on a bit. Every year, and we basically go out to our local schools and we use the children in those schools to connect with local people in the area to create the Christmas decorations for our trees. It's a really simple project and it works really well. So each year on site we host some very unusual decorations. They always cause lots of interest. There's some great stories that are told through the trees, but they're all inspired by conversations held with older residents. So we've been running it since 2007, and each year about 200 children take part. And again, that's mirrored by another 200 older people that have engaged with them. Each young person works with artists that are invited into their class, and they invite, as I said, older people for a tea party to share their stories of Christmases past and present. A lot of the stories that are shared are obviously about food because it's that time of year, and we get some very interesting things emerge. Sorry, I'm skipping along here. The process is really simple. It's a 2-day project of workshops in local schools. We basically take one class of children. Each class is about 30 children in each one. And the first day, the artists work with the children to design how they're going to host their older people. They get to think about how they're going to ask them questions. They get to think about how they're going to be good hosts. And they have to think about how they're going to record their information. In the afternoon, they hold a tea party. Lots of them have baked cakes. And they discuss after that what they found out, and then they translate that into a decoration. Sorry, there's a bit of a delay on the slides. I'm stuck. So it starts with a letter, a good old-fashioned letter, and each child sends a letter out to an older person that they know. It's often a grandparent. If they can't, do apologise. If a child,
it's on back on.
I'm back. If a grandparent isn't available, or someone that they know isn't available, the school then finds them an older person that they can work with. Often, I don't know if it's the same for other people, but our local schools tend to host a lunch club every day. Different older people come and have lunch with the children, and it's often those people that will act as a kind of elder in this situation. So they send a letter and they get a letter back from the older person who's coming, and that causes absolute delight because
all attendees are muted and may unmute themselves by pressing *6.
And sorry, I'm getting strange messages pop up at me. So the children send that letter, they get a letter back. They're delighted at receiving a letter because children, especially small children, do not get a lot of post. So letters are good old-fashioned letters, and official invitations obviously make older people feel included. So they host their tea party in the afternoon, people turn up, and one of the artists that we've worked with is Italian, and she has noticed that in Italy particularly, everybody writes things down on their tablecloths. The waiters write down your order, people write notes. So we use this as part of the engagement process. So as the children interview the older people, they write down their stories on the tablecloths, which they seem to really enjoy. And it's the tablecloths that become the inspiration for the decorations and the things that they use later on. And the grandparents seem to be quite tickled by this as well. Many of the people that turn up bring objects with them. And objects are a great way of talking about stories and time and how things have changed. This is a picture of someone who is demonstrating how they used to make things, used to make a lot of their decorations, and they bring all sorts of things with them. Toys, photographs. The picture in the left-hand bottom corner is a picture of what a ration of sweets would have looked like, images, and the children really respond well to objects, and actually the older people find it very easy to talk around a subject when they've got an object to talk around. The objects are good. And then the children take the tablecloths, they rip up all their conversations, and they start to translate them into the decorations. But the conversations, as Wendy alluded to earlier, the conversations between the older people and their selected elders are fascinating. And we've had all sorts of interesting things emerge about how Christmas dinners used to be cooked communally in different ovens, various things that were eaten, and it's a great way for people to explore how things have changed, both ways. For the children to understand how things have changed for their grandparents or for their elders, and for them to understand how things have changed for those guys too. So I think it's quite important that there's something that both gets out of this. It's not just a dump of information from one generation to another, but an exchange about each bringing something that they know. This was a recipe that was shared, a recipe for the perfect Christmas, and I particularly love this, all the things that they could have found. It gets a bit creepy further along about things when you get to the process of things: invite family, wrap up presents, cook dinner, play games, cook the rabbit, which it does sound a bit like Fatal Attraction, but in actual fact, it's because rabbit comes up a lot. A lot of old people ate rabbit. They didn't eat turkey. They didn't eat chicken. That was all very expensive. Various things get created. Artists tend to use a particular form in which to take some of these memories and stories. All sorts of random things get made, if I'm honest. But the important thing is that they use photographs of those people that they've spoken to, and they try to incorporate some of the objects that people have provided. Very, very important at the end of the process. We always have a party here at Eden that invites everybody back who is involved to give thanks and to celebrate what they've done, but also really important that the children get to reconnect with the people that they've spoken to, and the people that they've spoken to feel very valued, and they like to see how their kind of stories and their information has been translated. These are some of the trees. These are photographs of the artists and their trees. And this is the street in Eden. So we give these trees and these messages are really high profile at Eden. They're not hidden away, they're not tucked in a corner, they're in our main visitor centre as you come down. And I think the things, if you're going to so much of an effort to collect these stories and these memories, that you need to show that you value them. So we always put them somewhere really high profile. We've also found that there's some fantastic key kind of learning outcomes for the children right from the very start, from when they're writing the letter of invitation to hosting the tea party, to creating the decorations, to that managing that exchange between the older people. It's great for their speaking and listening skills, asking questions, responding appropriately, making relevant contributions and being able to take turns. It's fantastic for history. They get to ask and answer questions. They get to select and record relevant information. They can investigate how local history has changed over time. It's fantastic for citizenship. They can try and see things from the point of view of others, thinking about the lives of people in other times and places. They can develop relationships through working with different groups and different people. And it's fantastic, you know, for art skills. They also have to think about working alone and working in collaboration with others. So older people are brilliant for helping younger people to learn. And you can get really creative in the way that you do that. And this is just a small example. It's a simple project, but you could take the central, the basic process of invitation, some kind of hosting event, and creating something that will represent and value those contributions. And you could apply that in lots of different settings in lots of different ways. So sorry, I've raced through. I hope we might be back on time. That's the end. Thank you.
Juliet, that's absolutely wonderful and very inspirational, but very simple idea. And I think you've now solved a problem for me for one of the projects I actually work on. Interestingly enough, it was actually a time bank that's in Lewisham called the Rushy Green Time Bank, which was actually set up to address isolation of older people. And we're doing a lot more work now about engaging younger people with the older population in Lewisham. And I think that idea in terms of interaction and creating something, but also having the focus around, again, tea, I think you've solved my problem. So thank you very much for that. That's wonderful. And I think, sorry, Juliet.
Tea is the answer to everything.
It is indeed. So thanks ever so much for that. I think just to focus a little bit about the intergenerational bit being really important. Just as an aside, there's a wonderful project that happens in Hackney, which is called the Posh Club. I'll give you a link to this later on, or certainly as part of the notes. This is actually organised by an organisation called Ducky, who run a gay club at the Vauxhall Tavern in London. And this is a weekly event that they have, and they say it's for queers and old dears. Focuses around high tea and entertainment, and it engages people in their 70s and 80s with the younger LGBT community. So it's very much focused around high tea and entertainment. So it's all about glamour. Go and have a look at the work they've done, because that's a great intergenerational project. And again, food is the main focus of that, as well as the entertainment. That brings me on to the Hove Luncheon Club. Unfortunately, Caroline Henderson, who actually runs this, is a very busy individual, and so consequently she was going to present today, but she's busy in the community doing, so she's very kindly given me some notes for this wonderful project that she helps run, mainly in conjunction with volunteers, and this is very much about meeting a local need. This was a club set up originally by Age UK in 2011, but they lost funding, and so it's now an independent club that's been set up and is run by Caroline Henderson. And she strikes me, one of the things that Wendy talked about was that passion, and it's that passion that I get from liaising with Caroline that has really driven this project forward. So I'll do the best I can in terms of talking to you about her project. She talks about this as an extended family, and whilst the practicalities are providing a 3-course hot meal for older people twice a week, with, most importantly, the food coming from Fair Share, so that's all waste food. This is aimed really about engaging isolated older people within the community. So they currently feed about 80 people a week. Apart from Caroline, who's the only paid part-time coordinator, it does rely on quite diverse and range of ages in relation to the volunteer team there. And I asked her really why it worked and why their membership has grown from originally 15 up to the whole membership of the group, up to 65 people are engaged in this over the last 3 years. So that's something that we're just going to cover off briefly now. She said at the core of this is having somewhere that's friendly and welcoming. I know that sounds obvious, but this is very much a social anchor for a lot of the individuals that come along, both the volunteers and those people who are actually the older people who are having a meal with them. For a lot of people, this is their only time for social contact. Many of their members live alone. They might have lost partners, friends and family, and they're very much at risk of being very isolated. Quite often they're unable to prepare meals for themselves, either because they can't get out to the shops or they have mobility issues. And this is a place for real bringing people together and making friends. Something that Wendy touched upon is a place where people actually feel valued. This is something that's actually run by the users as such. They have regular meetings where everyone's invited. They capture feedback about the club and how they can make it better. She says it's a club run by the people for the people. And one of the key things here is that the actual premises is very accessible as well. And accessibility, again, something Wendy touched upon, is really key here. Of course, this one is all about food, and it's all homemade food. They always start with a homemade soup, and one of the key things in terms of getting feedback from the users was that they wanted more traditional meals. It's something they're used to, that they wanted. Sometimes they do experiment, but very occasionally might have the odd curry, but it is your more traditional meals because that's what this group of people actually wanted. And they cater for all diets as well, whether or not that be gluten-free, those people who are diabetic, etc. So that's core, getting feedback about what people like. So they cook things like toad in the hole, apple crumble, trifle, some of those more traditional things. Some of their members during the week, if they can cook, very much rely on ready microwave meals. She highlighted that some of the participants just ate cereal during the week. And in one case, they only ate cheese and biscuits. So for a lot of people, this is their only proper 3-course hot meal during the week. And it's all about bringing people together and having, she says, a real treat that they really wouldn't have at home as well. Cool thing here, again, touching upon what Wendy was low cost, and most importantly about transport. They only make a charge of £2 for the meal and transport. They do a lot of fundraising. It is run by volunteers, aside Caroline. They've managed to get free use of a hall and kitchen, and it's in the local Methodist church, so it's very much in the heart of the community. And whilst they ask for a £2 donation, some of the members can actually afford a bit more, so if they want to pay a bit more, they can, but that isn't compulsory. But core to this is transport, especially to the person that's isolated by disability or on a low income who can't access public transport and where a private taxi might be prohibitive. My father actually runs it's not a very nice name, but that's what it's called. He runs a blind tea club. He's partially sighted and 80, and the club's been set up for those people who are, again, isolated with disability. Mainly, well, they range from 80 up to 105. And that's focused around just having tea together. But the core point of that is the fact that they've actually got transport to that. as well. And that's one key thing here to bear in mind, as well as obviously managing to get a free haul. So it's not just about the food. They do, once a month, they have enough money in their pot to do some sort of entertainment. And that's all about stimulating memories, and they get people up dancing, etc. And they've also run a project recently called the Life Story Snapshot with the volunteers. And that was about capturing members' life stories and photos of when they were younger. And apparently this is such a rewarding process because they've got now a collection of fascinating biographies of the lives of their members, and they're thinking of actually publishing that as well. And that's all very much about saying, you know, we're interested in you, we're interested in your life, not just about you here and now, but you as a full person as well. In terms of diversity, they again work with the local school children who come along and help out, and also a lot of younger people within the community. They do placements for volunteers, some of which have learning disabilities, where they can learn catering skills. So they have some volunteers with learning disabilities as well, and links with the local Brighton High School. So they're very much able to offer something for the whole community. And by offering food, they're actually, you know, it's a hand of friendship out to the local community. If you do want to find out a bit more, there are Caroline's contact details there. Great example of how obviously food is used to bring people together, but it's just so much more than that as well. So I hope I've done justice to the Hove Luncheon Club, because it sounds like a fabulous project there. So now we're just going to go on to some questions. I'm just going to start off with one more generally. We've had a few questions come through. More generally for Wendy, actually. We've got an increasing, obviously, ageing population, and originally the definition of an older person was 50 plus. As I'm just about to turn 51, I don't identify as being an older person. And I think that's something that we also need to be conscious of is, you know, how do we identify whether or not somebody is an older person?
I know how you feel, Marie. I'm 54 and I'm already getting a and it's highly insulting, isn't it? It's highly insulting. How do you find an older person? Oh, do you know what? It's a difficult question, that, because I think it's, well, I guess there's two answers really, isn't there? There's within our project, for us, it's people over 65. If you ask my father who an older person was at the age of 83, he'd tell you it was somebody in their 90s. If you ask a 3-year-old, you know, what is an older person, they'd probably tell you it was somebody in their 20s. I think it's more about people's attitudes, actually, than what age they are. So I think it's people's attitudes. It's looking at, you know, what's their life skills, what's their knowledge, what's their passion, you know, and even people who have lived for many years in a community. I think retired people in particular maybe know more about the community. So maybe we shouldn't be talking about older people as such, but sadly in society these days, I think it's just people have to be labelled and put in a box somewhere, and it's not something I agree with, but there you go. I don't know whether that's answered your question very well, but yeah, who is an older person?
It'd be interesting to see what other people's opinions of that are, but yes, maybe it's about redefinition, and then maybe it's over 65. But again, I suppose it's going to come down to the individual as well. I don't think my mother identified as being an older person until she was 70 at least. So we do have one question about some sort of guidance on public liability insurance. Especially working with vulnerable adults. I don't know if any of our speakers, Wendy, Juliet, have any information on that, or can signpost people to something?
Yeah, well, we just had a little chat about it actually, Maria, and we didn't think it did make that much of a difference. But Wendy was saying what was important was about safeguarding.
Yeah, I mean, I'm quite happy to go back and talk with my colleague Vicky, who deals with that side of things. I'm not aware that it's actually affected our public liability insurance, but then the Sensory Trust has been working with older people and young people for many years, so I am quite happy to go back and double check on that, just to make absolutely sure that it hasn't affected. But it's more, I think, really about having your safeguarding adults, vulnerable children, vulnerable adults policies in place, and making sure that maybe if you're working with younger volunteers, even that they are trained or made aware of how you behave and work with vulnerable adults. With us, it's in particular, it's about respecting people with dementia and knowing exactly how to converse and communicate and treat older people with dementia. But I'll happily go back and double check if people are interested. Yes, I can see there's a comment there about the someone with the DBS. Yeah, I mean, on our Creative Spaces project, our volunteers, if somebody's interested, they come in, they talk to us. We also invite them out on one of our activity clubs, so that the beneficiaries, the people with dementia, meet them, because they have to be happy with a volunteer as well. If that goes well, then we go through the DBS checks, and we do offer dementia awareness training, first aid in outdoor activities training, obviously, and the training in the moving and handling of persons. So if anybody has a fall, then at least the volunteers know exactly how to support them and help them back up again.
Okay, great. We did have a club question about lunch clubs at schools were mentioned. Juliet, did your project involve a lunch club, or?
Well, so some of the school groups that we worked with, some of the schools that we worked with ran lunch clubs for older people, where older people came and had a school lunch with the children. And it's weird, it's not a new thing, because I remember it from when I was at school, which I probably can assure you was quite some time ago. So, and the same thing, we used to have two different people came every day and joined our school lunch, and people would take it in turns to sit and talk to them. So they would, there'd be a different couple of people came, and that was in a secondary school. So these were primary schools that we were working with to produce the Christmas tree project, and it was our local primary schools. And I don't know, I can absolutely find out more for you about how it's maintained and who pays for it. But as I understood it, again, two people come. They come in vast numbers, but it's a couple of people. They live locally, often within walking distance of the school, and they just once a week come and have lunch with the children. And it's a very lovely thing, to be honest.
Oh, that's great. Wonderful. We had a comment here, which I totally agree with, which is about, is it really necessary to define an older person? Surely most of the people we're considering here will be self-selecting or referred individuals or groups, which is quite often the case as well. And Simon's also posted up, who works on one of our projects at Sustain. He's put in a useful link about working with older people with combined sight and hearing loss, called Deaf Blind. And he's actually posted up a link there, which hopefully everyone can see in their left-hand box, for sense.org. About Enjoy Life. He was apparently part of the policy team, and it includes activities such as lunch clubs, gardening, country dancing, that sort of thing. So that's a very useful link as well there. Has anyone else got, if anyone else wants to post any further questions, please come back to me before I just sort of wrap up. Any of our speakers, any further comments that you'd like to make?
It's just Juliet here. I think I think it's the Institute of Intergenerational Studies has got quite a lot of research And I think, you know, some advice about if you want to do that kind of project, about what the things that you need to think about, particularly about how you host an exchange rather than one group just kind of telling another. So that might be worth having a look at as well.
Okay, that's great. Okay, I mean, just I think some of the key themes that have come out here are out, or sounds obvious, about involving people, consultation, making sure that people feel valued and are actually actively involved. The time bank that I'm involved in, it's all about sharing those skills so that people feel that they're valued. You know, that can be knitting, it can be baking a cake, it can be just befriending somebody by making a phone call. And it was interesting, some of the things I hadn't considered that Wendy brought out about using things like local radio. I hadn't really considered that. Something now for some of the projects I work on I'll look at. And most importantly, not boxing people, and this whole thing about increasingly people using social media as well. And being aware of the fact that older people are a key source of volunteers. Some of the community projects I work on, we have quite a lot of older people involved who can have a role. You know, I do nature conservation and gardening. They can't always actively participate in all of that, but they can certainly make tea and get involved in other aspects of it if the other bits are more physically challenging as well. And I think some of the other things that came out about getting people to try some things, whether or not they, you know, it's something that they can feel engaged with. The whole thing about having a venue that's accessible to people, it was something that Caroline brought out in the work that she'd done at the Hove Luncheon Club. And certainly the whole thing about making something intergenerational and not just or always just for older people, etc. Wendy talked about a little bit about dementia, and one of the SUSTAIN projects I work on called Growing Health, which looks at wellbeing benefits of community food growing. We've got a conference coming up on wellbeing for gardening for wellbeing, and one of the key focuses there is around dementia. So we've got some interesting speakers from Growing Support in Bristol, where they've done some work with the local public health group about making community gardens more accessible for people with dementia, rather than necessarily having specific garden sessions for them. We've got a PhD student presenting her latest work on community gardening and dementia. And also we've got the GP who set up Sydenham Garden here in London, who's talking about that side of things, and they run now a regular group for people with dementia called Sow and Grow, which is actually commissioned by the local clinical commissioning group. And we've actually got the commissioners coming along to talk about why that project has been commissioned and continually gets funded as well. So if you're interested in that side of things, that conference is going to be on the 6th of December in London. You can find out more information about that via the SUSTAIN website as well. And I've got a further question here. I think some of those things we can come back to. I think we covered most of that now. So I'd just like to say a big thank you to our hosts, the Sustainable Food Cities Network, and a really big thank you to our participants today, and most especially our speakers. And also just to signpost you again to the Crunch website. There's some fabulous resources that are available there that you can use for engagement purposes. And if you want to, if you're not already an ambassador, I know we've got some ambassadors who've joined us today, then do go and sign up. There's a host of materials that you can download there as well in terms of community engagement. So thank you very much. And this will be available online, so you can signpost us to this as well. So thank you very much for joining us, and hopefully see or listen to us again on November the 22nd, where we'll be covering engaging families. Thank you very much.